Hi everybody, it's Randy with Direct Action Combat Performance. This morning we're going to talk about the disassembly and reassembly for field strip portion of care and cleaning of these firearms. In the front we have the Glock 17. In this particular model we have the Walther PPQ, Sig Sauer P320, and the Beretta APX. So what I'm going to show you is the disassembly and reassembly for the purposes of care and cleaning. All right, with all firearms, ensure when you do pick up the gun, you carry out your safety precautions to ensure that the gun is in fact clear of any potential dangers or hazards. So no rounds in the chamber. All right, for the purposes of this demonstration, this will be referred to as the safety area. So whenever I'm pointing the gun, I'll point the gun in this direction and that'll be identified as the safety area. All right, we'll start with the Glock. So with the trigger finger along the frame of the gun, we're going to depress the magazine catch, allowing the magazine to release freely from the gun. And we're going to lock the slide to the rear by pushing up on the slide catch, which will lock the slide to the rear. And from this position, we can visually and physically inspect the chamber and the magazine well to ensure that there's actually nothing in that gun. The gun is now clear. We're going to release the slide, allow it to move into full battery in a safe direction. Press the gun out, release the trigger, the striker down. So now the striker is down. We're in a position to then remove the slide from the frame. So with the master hand, we're going to grasp over the top of the slide. With the thumb around the beaver tail, we're going to remove the slide so it's just at a full battery. With the thumb and index finger, we're going to press down. As we press down onto the slide lock, release the slide, and then the slide will then remove freely from the frame itself. Place the frame down, and then what you have here is the slide with the recoil spring assembly. You can remove that, and then we can remove the barrel. So this would be the state of a field strip, the care and cleaning, lubrication of the parts that would be the high friction components of the firearm while it's in operation. To reassemble the firearm, it's in reverse order. So we'll ensure that the barrel seats into the slide properly, and then we'll ensure that the back portion, the flat portion of this recoil spring assembly will seat properly into the cut groove into the barrel itself. We'll place it inside, ensure it's seated so it's flat and happy, level, and then with the grooves of the slide and the rails of the frame, we're going to line everything up. And then now the gun is reassembled. All right, next we'll do the field strip for the Walther PPQ. So as always, treat the gun as if it was loaded. Ensure that you're pointing the gun into a safe direction as you manipulate the firearm to do whatever it is you need to do. All right, so as we pick up the firearm, trigger fingers resting along the frame. We see that there's a magazine seated into the magazine well, so we're going to press the magazine catch, allow the magazine to fall freely to the ground, and as we press up onto the slide catch, the slide is now locked to the rear where we can visually and physically inspect that there is absolutely nothing in the chamber or going to cause any danger. From there, you can release the trigger, release the slide, and then in a safe direction, depress the trigger, allowing the striker to fall down. So once we pull the trigger and allow the striker to fall, we're in a position to separate the frame and the slide. So we're going to grasp over top of the slide, thumb along the beaver tail and the back strap of the gun, take the slide and remove it at a full battery with the thumb and index finger pressed down onto the slide lock. From there, release the slide, separating the frame from the slide. Place the frame down, and then similarly we got a guide ride and spring, so the recoil spring assembly separated from the barrel, and the barrel separated from the slide. Now we're in a position to check everything out, apply a little bit of lube in some areas that would be adequate, and then we're ready to reassemble it. So to reassemble in reverse order, ensure that the barrel is seated properly. From there, we'll reassemble the guide rod and spring, ensuring that it's fitted properly into the barrel itself, it's parallel to the slide, and it's even. And then we will line up the grooves in the slide with the rails of the frame and reassemble the slide and the frame as previously shown. For the next firearm, the Sig P320, this is an X5 model. Slightly different in terms of the procedure to separate the frame and the slide, but everything leading up to that in terms of safety precautions is the same. So finger rest along the frame, depress the magazine catch with the master hand thumb, allow the magazine to fall freely to the ground. We're going to lock the slide to the rear by pressing up onto the slide catch, inspect the chamber, visually and physically ensure there's nothing dangerous in that chamber. Release the trigger, or release the slide in a safe direction. Depress the trigger, allowing the striker to fall down. And then from here, what we're going to do is lock the slide to the rear, pressing up onto the slide catch, like so. And then this takedown lever, we're going to rotate into the vertical position, like so. And this will enable us to separate the frame from the slide. Recoil spring assembly and the barrel separated. Care, cleaning, lubrication when it's time to reassemble in reverse order. Seat the barrel into the slide. Line up the recoil spring assembly. Ensure that it's parallel to the slide and evenly centered. And we'll line up the channels on the slide with the grooves into the frame. Lock it fully to the rear, locking in place the slide catch, and then we'll rotate the takedown lever back into the forward position. Now the gun is fully reassembled. You can unlock the slide, depress the trigger, allowing the striker to fall, and the gun is reassembled. The next one will be the Beretta APX. Same safety precautions, trigger rests along the frame, point the gun in a safe direction, depress the magazine release button, the magazine catch, allowing the magazine to fall freely to the ground. From there, we will lock the slide to the rear, which will open the chamber. We can visually and physically inspect the chamber. So press up onto the slide catch as we pull the slide to the rear. We have it locked in place. We can visually, physically inspect the chamber to ensure that there's absolutely nothing in the chamber. The gun is clear. Release the slide. Take up a good firing position in a safe direction as we squeeze the trigger, allowing the striker to fall. Now there's a couple ways to separate the slide from the frame on this particular firearm. One is if the user doesn't want to pull the trigger, there's a striker deactivation button right here. So I'm going to show you how to use that. So we'll disassemble it once using the striker deactivation, and then once as we pull the trigger, similar to the other models. All right, so if, for an example, the action was racked and there's tension onto the trigger, a way to release that tension on the trigger, which in other words, another term would be striker down. So to allow the striker to fall without pulling the trigger. What we can do is grasp onto the firearm, putting a little bit of tension onto the slide in the rearward position. So as we put a little bit of tension, now with a tool, you're going to press down onto the deactivation button, which is located right here. Press in. And what that does is it releases the trigger tension, the spring tension on the striker. So now the striker is down. So as we push in on the round button to the right hand side of the frame, push it in, rotate the takedown lever into the vertical position like so, and then the slide and the frame will be separated. So similar to the other models, we have the recoil spring assembly and the barrel completely separated. As a user, we can look at care and cleaning and lubrication of specific parts. To reassemble, ensure that the barrel is seated properly into the channel. Reassemble. Okay. Reassemble the recoil spring assembly. Line up the slide grooves with the channels of the frame. Now what you'll notice is once this slide is completely reattached to the frame, the takedown lever is rotated into the neutral position or the fully horizontal position. Press the gun out, allow the striker to fall, and then now this gun is ready to be used. Version 2, disassemble without activating the striker deactivation button. What we can do is similar to the other models, ensure that there's no magazine on the gun by depressing the magazine catch. Lock the slide to the rear like we've done previously. Ensure the chamber is clear. There's nothing in the gun is 100% clear. Press the trigger. Now we've allowed the striker to fall. There's no spring tension on the trigger mechanism itself. All right, once the trigger has been depressed and the striker is down, then what we're going to do is press down onto the takedown lever button that's on the right hand side of the frame, push it in, and then rotate the lever straight down so it's in the vertical position. That will separate the frame and the slide itself. All right. Recoil spring assembly, barrel, and slide. Do what you need to do, and then as we reassemble it, barrel goes in, recoil spring assembly goes in, ensure that it's seated properly, centered and parallel to the slide. Line up the grooves onto the frame with the channels of the slide. And then as we pull the slide to the rear, what you'll notice is the takedown lever will naturally rotate into its forward reset position. So now the gun has been fully reassembled and it's ready to go. And in a safe direction, allow the striker to fall. So the striker is down, there's no spring tension on the trigger mechanism whatsoever, and the gun is ready to go to the range. So with the Glock 17, the safe action trigger mechanism, the way it works is if there was a round in the chamber and the action would be ready to be fired, the first component of the safe action trigger is the actual trigger safety itself. So there's a small blade that you see right here. So that trigger blade, unless that trigger blade is depressed to the rearward position, the trigger itself is unable to be squeezed, which would prevent, you know, an inadvertent discharge of a round. Right, so the first component is the trigger safety, which is that blade right there. So the trigger blade itself is the trigger safety. The second two components are internal, which one is the firearm pin safety. So the firearm pin safety would not be actuated until there's pressure onto the trigger in a straight back square position. And then the third component of the safe action trigger is the drop safety. So the drop safety is designed to prevent an inadvertent discharge of a round in the event that the gun was dropped or thrown or hit on something where there would be enough inertia to allow the striker to protrude forward. All right, so the safe action trigger has three components, one of which is the trigger safety, one of which is the firing pin safety, and the other is the drop safety, which is all built internally. So it makes the gun extremely safe. It also provides a component of simplicity in terms of less moving parts. There's nothing external to the gun itself in terms of a manual manipulation safety. So the gun is high quality, highly safe, highly efficient, and very optimal firearm. So there's 4 different firearms, striker fire firearms, some slight variations and differences and nuances with the disassemble and reassemble, but in a lot of ways very complementary to each other. If you have any questions, reach out to me. It's randy@directactions.ca. That's randy@directactions.ca.